Hey guys, check this out. I am officially now sponsored by Dubby. Dubby is a clean energy drink made to give you focus with no crash. If you guys are like me, you're always needing a burst of energy, especially with one with no crash. Dubby contains vitamins, amino acids, a nootropic, and 150 milligrams of caffeine. It keeps me awake with no jitters, guys. Check it out. Merch link is in the bio. Dubby.
In this world that did not tune in to the and you believe that there are some people in this world that did not tune in to the Alliance Vlog podcast. Shame on you!
Shame on you. My name is Ella Envy and I'm one half of the NWA Women's World Tag Team Champion.
And I'm Kinsey Page, the other half of the NWA World Women's Tag Team Champion.
And you better go listen to the Alliance Vlog, what is it called again?
Podcast, period.
Or you're ugly. Pretty and power approved. Alright.
Okay, those are my friends, the besties, if you will, the women's tag team champions. That is Miss Kinsey Page and Miss Ella Envy, and they endorse the Alliance Guys podcast, as we hope you all enjoy the Alliance Guys podcast. But today we're talking to a fellow podcaster, but more than just a podcaster, a gosh dang journalist, a gosh dang author who has written now 3 books, guys. Vinny Berry, my pal, my friend, my confidant, someone who I admire, someone who I look up to, someone who I aspire to be like. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much.
I do not say this to blow smoke up anywhere, any place, but I am so dang proud of you for being able to do what you're doing by taking this history, taking these stories, these personalities, these people, and not only having the podcast, but then documenting a little bit about them and a little bit about the stories that they've told you and putting it in book form. It amazes me. And we were talking a little bit off the air, but it's just such a cool concept. It's such a cool idea. And what I love about it is, and you guys, if you look at the cover of this book, right, you'll see like there's people on there like Jazz and Thunder Rosa, but you'll also see guys like Congo Kong. You'll see Kamala. You'll see Bobby Eaton. The thing about what Vinny's doing here is he's talking to people from the past, present, and future of pro wrestling. And as somebody who's documented a lot of professional wrestling in my time, things get forgotten. Things get left out, and history tends to forget those moments, those opportunities, those stories. And I think it's really cool, Vinny, that you've been able to capture that and share it with not just the listeners of the podcast for the Wrestleville podcast, but also when you put it in book form and make it available to everybody. We talked to you last year about your the project from last year, the volume 1, and now you've got volume 2 out. Tell us a little bit again about the process of how you vetted this talent. You found these very interesting people and these interesting stories. How did you get to that process?
Well, I think I just going back, just rewinding a little bit back further without getting into too long of a story. I worked in television news for about 18 years, I think, almost.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, 18, 19 years. And so that taught me how to look for stories. It taught me how to, to kind of see like, okay, that looks like a giraffe, but maybe it's not a giraffe. Let's get a better look. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it taught me how to, kind of spot stories and see stories. And but I was more on the photographer side, more on the producer side, working with the reporters. And so I always had a interest in writing and done some writing in the past. When I moved down here to South Texas from Phoenix, I ended up meeting some guys right away that covered boxing and MMA, and had a little bit of boxing experience, had a little bit of writing experience, and they ended up bringing me along with them. And I just started doing boxing. I started doing a lot of MMA, which I really had to learn, right?
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, so I worked. We did that for, I don't know how many years I did that, probably until about 2015, maybe the beginning. So about 4 years. And crazy thing, somewhere in midstream of that, I became the matchmaker of one of the promotion companies down here. And that happened because I was working in PR with the promoter's sister. I was doing all the stories, but helping her get the word out, making graphic posters and stuff like that, doing a lot of social media for them. And he would call me up like days before the title fight and say, hey, we're going to have to cancel the fight. I need you to write something up. This is what happened. We lost our, say, 140 contender. And I said, well, why don't you call this guy? And he'd say, well, who is that? And I was like, man, that dude's number 4 ranked in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
In that division. So, let's call that guy. And that was basically how I fell into that role was, and he couldn't believe how well I knew, I guess, the game, right? But I was writing about him. So I knew who was who. So anyway, that's where that happened. But when that all kind of came to an end, we had some promoters kind of disband and whatnot, move away or whatever, and it kind of dried up down here. And when that happened, I told my wife, I said, I gotta keep on writing. I can't just stop, because it was like a withdrawal. It was like, I had that longing to write. So she was like, look, I don't care what you do, but this time you drive the car, so to speak. You get your own website, you be your own boss.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay. And I said, hey, this might sound crazy, but I'm going in a totally different direction. I'm going to start writing about wrestling. She said, I don't care. So that's what I did. And I started, I had a few contacts on Facebook of wrestlers. I just started reaching out to them, and I started telling them what I was doing. And before you know it, someone would introduce me to somebody else, and someone would introduce me to somebody else. And before you know it, somewhere along the line, I got introduced to Lance Von Erich. And I told him what I wanted to do. We started working on that. And at that time, I was just writing stories, Jay, for the website, kind of, sharpening the saw, so to speak, just kind of keeping my tools sharp and writing and learning and just, and I started doing that. Well, when it came time for follow up of Lance, I was talking to Kenny Casanova, and he says, what are you thinking about doing? And I said, well, I'm not sure. I had a couple ideas, but he was like, look, how many short stories do you have?
Yeah.
You could put those in a compilation. And so I started looking at them, and that's what I did. And I, to avoid from having a book that was going to be like 500 pages, I went ahead, when I got the idea, I basically had the idea that I'd do a 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I came. And, people ask me all the time, they're like, well, how do you pick the stories for the book? And, I just, I start talking to these people, these wrestlers, I watch them, and there's something about them that I think, they're interesting people. I think everybody has a story, sometimes you have to look for it, but, I just enjoy talking to them and some of the things that I learned about them. And yeah, I just started doing that. So I don't really like, I'm going to use this one, I'm not going to use that one, I'm going to use this one, I'm not going to. I use them. I mean, if I go out of the way to talk to you and spend time working on it. I'm probably gonna, well, I did. I put it in the book.
So I mean, I got to ask you this because I'm sitting here and I'm the book is right here on my desk. I'm looking at it right now, and I've seen so many familiar faces that are already in this book. But you're still doing a weekly. Well, I don't know. It's not exactly weekly, but you're still producing interviews on Wrestleville, the podcast, like all the time, right?
I try to post 2 a week.
Two a week. Okay, so that's more than I even realized. So you're still executing a ton of content. And you said, like, if you took the time to write that to do that podcast, does that necessarily go into an idea for a book down the road, or is it you just pick and choose with whom you speak to?
On the podcast that I've been doing for the last couple years, I guess, what was it? It was about, I can't remember really what number I was on, but I got to this place with the podcast where it was, it was like, I kind of went through a drought, right? I was like,
yeah.
You know how, I mean, you have a podcast, so you know how it is about getting guests, and it was almost, I don't know if it was like a breaking point, but it was a frustration. And I just started getting to this point where, man, I'm just not, I don't know if I'm going to keep on doing this. Well, before you know it, it started getting better. But then what I was doing too, I was holding some back, right? So, I'm producing some where I'm sitting on some. So like I could take 2-week vacation and still put out 2 a week for a month. Okay. Right. And so I started doing that, and that helped because it took some pressure off of, I need to get a podcast. Getting podcast guests is a lot easier now. I'm already working on another book, and I'm not intending to do a volume 3. I have the content for a volume 3.
Right.
That might be something down the road, but it's nothing that I'm looking at right now.
Well, then that begs the question: what are you working on now?
I'm working on an autobiography, and it is with Black Bart.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's pretty cool, man. I think it's funny. I was just talking to Danny Limelight. I know that you recently interviewed Papo Esco.
I did.
They both come from that bodega family. And one of the things that he said, now he wrestles, of course, and he's also a stuntman in Hollywood, but he's also had a few acting roles as well. And he told me on the podcast, well, yeah, and I'm going to write an autobiography next year. And he made it sound like it's such an easy thing to do. It's such a, of course, he knows his life better than anybody else. But, when you're writing, when you put pen to paper or typing away on a keyboard, it's not always easy. How do you manage that, the finding the time, the inspiration, and do you have some sort of schedule that you keep to keep yourself writing constantly?
Well, that is a very good question. My cousin tells me all the time, he says, writing isn't the hard part. It's finding the time to write. That's the hard part, right?
Right.
And there definitely is a lot of truth to that. There are some days, Jay, I can sit in front of the computer and, pound out a 3 or 4 sentence, 4-line sentence, and take me 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And then there's some days that, I'm in my office here, and my wife will say, hey, can I get you to do something? I said, yeah, I'll take care of the trash right now, but I got to get back in there because I'm writing. And
you got the juices flowing.
She knows when it's flowing that I don't come out, and I'll tell her. She goes, hey, I made dinner. I said, okay, are you real quick? But hun, you got to understand, it's coming out right now. I'm writing, and when it's like that, I can stay in here, man, and have me really pound it out.
I mean, I love to hear that, because then it makes me feel like, hey, I'm not the only one. Because there'll be days where like I'll stand here and look at the computer monitor and I got nothing. But like you said, some days I sit there and I'm there for just a few minutes, and everything's hitting on that right cylinder, and you're like, oh yes, this is gonna work, and you just start typing away, and it flows out wonderfully, and even going back and editing it, hey, it still sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
I feel you on that one. That's pretty cool. Now you mentioned that the process of like you just kind of reached out to wrestlers, and I'm hoping that people who are listening to this episode, not only do they love wrestling, but maybe they're looking to start a podcast themselves. What have you found to be some of the best practices when you meet a potential person interview, whether it be a wrestler or a wrestling personality? How do you approach them about speaking to them about doing an interview with you?
I just usually, I reach out to them, introduce myself to them, and tell them what I'm interested in doing, and bring them on as a guest. And so, as there's some conversations that just go really, really good. I don't know if you know who Moonshine Mantell is.
Oh yeah,
man, I talked to him about a week ago, and I just feel like I know that guy all my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've never met Moonshine Mantell. I've never spoken to him, but I've spoken to a lot of his contemporaries. A lot of guys I know who've worked with him or have used him on their shows, and salt of the earth kind of guy. I've heard nothing but good things about him.
Yeah, he was just so easy to talk to, and it's like, yeah. So, but you don't get that with everybody, and sometimes, few and far between. But so I'm going to ask you a couple questions about the book. What was it that you liked when you picked up the book, Jay? What did you like about this volume 2?
So I just got it yesterday, so I've just kind of scratched the surface of it. One of the coolest things that I do enjoy about it is the photos that you have included. And you list who's taking the photos, like Four Corners Photography, or and you've got photos of like Barbie Hayden and Jazz or Rodney Mack. And I think that adds a different element to the stories that you're telling too, because people can literally see, what you're doing and what they've. When you're sitting here reading an article about Sauronaro, you're reading this chapter about Sauronaro, but then you have photos of him in action. It kind of gives you a different perspective. Or like with Colby Corino, like I just happened to pull up this page of Colby Corino, who's rumored to be going to the WWE, which is kind of cool. And you've got photos of him working with Brian Pillman Jr. I think that's for me, I think that's a pretty cool element. But then also what I really like about it too is the diversity of who you've interviewed, because it's not just like, it's former WWE talents or it's up and coming indie talents. You really kind of cover the gamut of legends, of up and comers, of what we call indie darlings, people who have just now are making it to that main level of pro wrestling. That's what I really find interesting is, anyone could take a legend and write a book about them. Well, not anybody, but you know what I mean? It's that they have versed stories and the legacy and people know about them. But like, it's another thing when you write a chapter about Sauronaro, who I've been following Sauronaro's career since he was in NWA Wildside. And you have a couple of pages about him and in his time on the indies and all that. And I think that's really exciting and really cool that you've documented that piece of history. Sauronaro is not going to ever go down in the WWE Hall of Fame, but you've cemented his legacy in this book, and I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys. I mean, he's been making a living off professional wrestling for quite some time. He figured it out.
Yeah.
The thing that I like about this book, and I was on a podcast with Susan Tex Green, who is in this book, and we were talking about my volume 1, and she had said something, the fact that, you only have one woman in this book, and I said, well, I've been reaching out to you for a long time, so we set that up. And what I like about this book is when it comes to the women that are featured in this book, I'd have to say that, man, you talk about a home run. I've got Jazz in here. I've got Lalane Kai, who was in the first WrestleMania. I have Thunder Rosa. I have Nikita Knight, who is Thea Hall in NXT. I have Susan Green. I have Soraya Knight, the mother of Paige, and I have Maddie Rinkowski in here. And I think all those women are just solid in the women's division. Past, present, and future.
Yeah, and I look, this is kind of a typically my podcasts are more themed for NWA fans. We do a lot of NWA talk. I'm looking up and down your list. Maddie Rinkowski recently debuted for the NWA. She's been a regular in the women's division now. You've got Jeremiah Plunkett in here. You've got, like the aforementioned Jazz. You've got Kerry Morton in here. Andrew Anderson. Of course, Thunder Rosa, the former women's champion. Colby Carino, who has really kind of stepped out of his shell, if you will, while being in the NWA. And there's so many, Bryce, Sal Renaro and the Maestro, people who've played a role in the NWA's history, Leilani Kai, the people who are currently creating the history for the NWA. And that's another thing that I think is so cool, because there's not a lot of people out there who's writing about the current state of pro wrestling. There's a lot of people who are writing, books about the past. And that's perfectly acceptable too, because I feel like you need to document the history of pro wrestling. But again, when you're hitting up some of the newer names, some of the newer faces or lesser known talents, you're giving them that spotlight that I think is so important for the business, for pro wrestling. I mean, we're both podcasters and we talk to wrestlers and the fans of wrestling all the time. And I think what you're doing with these books is actually filling a service that is kind of neglected.
You know what? I was talking to somebody here recently. When you see the book online or on my website, it really doesn't do it justice. But man, if you could pick this thing up, and when I go to like live shows and people pick the book up, and they'll thumb through it, and then they'll read the table of contents, and then they'll flip through it again, and they're like, this person's in here, this person's in here, and within seconds they're just like, man, how much is this book? And I just I invite you to put your hands on it, because I'm telling you, it's one of those things where you pick it up, you're gonna walk away, you're gonna like read something about somebody that that you might not have known, and then you're going to discover some people that are out there in the business that you may feel like, hey, you know what, I don't know who that person is, but I kind of feel like I should, because they've been around for a long time. And then there you go.
And I just jumped right back in and started looking at some of the names again, and like Duke the Dumpster Drosy. You did have a Q&A in here with Bill Apter. I mean, some of these names, Kamala, the Ugandan Giant, some of these names are synonymous with the history of professional wrestling. And you're right. It's not just a, years ago I saw somebody who wrote a book about wrestling, and it was one of those PDF file type things that you can, you would buy on the Apple Store or the Google Store, and it was a good read. But there's something to be said to have an actual book, to actually have a hardback, and I could look in here and I could literally hold the book in my hands and read it. And I think that's super important. Again, because a PDF just sits there on your phone, but this is actually like, and I know it's going to sound cheesy, but like, it's art. Look at the cover. Look at last year's cover. I mean, these are attractive books.
Thank you. And I will say this, what really made me nervous was I couldn't secure the artist that did the first book.
Oh.
So I found another artist, and we talked extensively about what I wanted, and you know what? We got through it, and I'm really pleased with it, So yeah, I was surprised.
It's your artist who did the second. It's not far off from the original, and it's very handsome. It's a very, like I said, to me, when I look at it, it looks like art, and I think that's pretty cool too. It's not just, gosh, some of the book designs that I've seen out there aren't very attractive, but this is actually something that looks really cool. And again, like, I see every time I turn the page, I see something new, like Cody Deaner or I just said Jeremiah Plunkett a little bit ago, but Bobby Eaton, Congo Kong, Blake Christensen. It's just I'm really looking forward to getting to get very familiar with this book this weekend, and I'm really excited about it. Again, like the stories about some of these people. When you look at the book, what story was your favorite, or was there a few stories that were your favorite?
Yeah, there is a few. I like Bobby Eaton's story.
Sure.
I like Mario Mancini's story, and of course Nikita Knight and Thunder Rosa's. I like their stories, but I also like Blake Christian's story. Really tugged at my heart, and then the Northern Wrestling Federation. Was really a special piece to this book.
Yeah, and I know in the last book you talked to Jordan Clearwater, and with talking about, or maybe that's in this book.
Well, he was on the book. He was on the podcast. Jordan Clearwater was.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I got mixed up there.
That's okay.
But the whole Northern Wrestling Federation, that was such an important territory. Before the developmental promotions kind of took off, when WWE started really kind of producing their own developmental territories, that NWF was very important back in the day. And you see a lot of this talent that came from there who ended up in the WWE, guys like Carl the Machine Gun Anderson or Jillian Hall. I mean, it's pretty cool that, you see that maturation process from that wrestling promotion to the WWE, and those talents that are able to go from point A to point B. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think he has a really good formula. If he's producing, wrestlers of that caliber, Jordan Clearwater and Monster Abyss, and
sure,
Chris Harris was in the TNA for several years. I couldn't even guess. But when you take those talents and all the people that he's trained over the years, and hey, wrestling is a fickle business, right? So some of these people, they may, hey, you know what, I could make a lot more money working for, I don't know, Apple, or I can make a lot more money doing this, but they like to do this on the weekend or a couple of times a month or whatever. There's a couple people right in there now, a couple young talents that I think that people need to keep their eye on. And one is Lord Crew and one is Nikki Victory.
Lord Crew is a guy that, it's funny you brought him up, and I saw his picture in there. Lord Crew is a guy that I first saw in Atlanta when Dave Marquez was running Championship Wrestling from Atlanta. I was able to see him at center stage, and he had a great look, absolutely just intimidating individual. And then when Marquez shut down Championship Wrestling from Atlanta and focused all the effort into the main show, Championship Wrestling, presented by CarShield, that takes place in Irvine, they're starting to run in more different areas. But he brought Crew in, and that was a surprise to me, but a very pleasant surprise, because he's he looks like he's built for pro wrestling. Yeah, I don't know his story, but he has a great look, and he's very solid in the ring. He's somebody that I'm glad I got to witness in Atlanta, and now get to watch in California.
Yeah, no, he's he definitely, to me, is promising. And what I thought was really neat is when you go on Twitter and you look up this person, you follow to another wrestler or whatever.
Yeah.
I got down the Twitter rabbit hole,
Yeah.
And in this thread in this string, I came across him in there. Well, I know him from when I did the story, and I
Yeah.
thought, hey, this. I thought to myself, I said, man, this guy is on the right path. Because he is intertwined with all these people, right? And then he just recently he wrestled in the GCW. Yeah, and someone says he's a Cincinnati guy. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is that you?
No. That's Jeremy wrestling with the MMA. He's a part of our podcasting family here, but he follows the United Wrestling Network very closely. So he's familiar with Glory Crew. And then you said the guys that you're looking out for, or guys that we should be looking out for. Who else have you interviewed recently that you would say, like, this is somebody that everyone should be paying attention to?
Oh my goodness, I'm trying to think.
Put on your scouting hat. Tell me who's the next big thing, Vinny.
You know what? I like Isaiah Broner, and I like Jocelyn Navarro.
Jocelyn Navarro wrestled Jazz for the NWA Women's World Championship before Jazz ended up vacating it back in 2019. And the name stood out to me, and I saw that you interviewed her recently, and she seemed, a couple years ago, she seemed, kind of new to the sport, but when you wrestle somebody like Jazz, they force you to take that next step and to get better. Tell me a little bit about Jocelyn and how was her, how was your time speaking with her?
Well, she's a super great person, and so is Isaiah, and they're a couple, by the way. So they, but they're both very, very nice, and they're very nice to me. And I think when I look at their styles, both of them, you just take them, Isaiah and Jocelyn. Watch any of their matches, and they are physical, and they take it to the limit, man. And I really think that their style is really what pro wrestling needs. They're just, I watched, I guess before I interviewed both of them, I probably watched about 3 or 4 matches, and I just thought, wow, man, I can't wait to talk to these people. They're going to be awesome.
And I guess that's how you and I differ. Most of the people that I've interviewed, I've either spoken to them in person before, or I've had a long-term following of that person. When you reach out to them and they don't know you, what credentials do you flash to get their attention? Or is it just like you said earlier, you just talk to them about what you want to do and they either oblige or don't?
Yeah, I tell them, hey, man, I've covered news and sports for almost 20 years, and the last, 11 or 12 years has been combative sports, and, this is my website, and I'd like to interview you for about 30 minutes on my website. And, I kind of like going in cold, I don't write down questions. I'm going to ask them, hey, remember that match you had with Bobby Miller? I just like wherever the conversation goes. I've got a couple podcasts coming up that I'm sitting on right now. And let me tell you something. I know there's one in there for a fact that's going to blow socks off feet, man.
When Thunder Rosa came on my podcast, it was I was in Atlanta on the first power tapings, and a buddy of mine who knew Thunder Rosa fairly well said, "Hey, she's there. Do you want to interview her?" I was like, "Heck yeah! What do I have to do? I'll jump through whatever hoops I need to." And it just didn't work out because of the fact that there was so much television going on that we just couldn't work it out. So I didn't get to interview her then, and it wasn't until she became Women's World Champion that the opportunity finally came to me. Has there ever been an instance where you've reached out to somebody you've tried to interview, and by happenstance they become a hotter commodity after you or before you were able to interview them?
Well, yeah, it was Thunder Rosa.
Yeah, funny enough.
Yeah, because I tried reaching out to her when I first started the website, so back in 2017,
Wow.
and it was off and on. I mean, like, and she was all for it, but I mean, she has a busy schedule, right?
Oh yeah.
And we had troubles uh, tracking it down. And every, I don't know, 6 months, every 9 months, I'd reach out to her and she'd be all for it, and never hear it or whatever, just nothing ever came of it. And she was having a show outside of Austin, and I was selling my books up there. And my wife came with me, and she met us at the entrance. And I said to my wife, I said, "Honey, you're looking at the best woman wrestler right now in professional wrestling." And you
I still
know,
agree with that. I still I and this we hear a lot of the controversy that's happened in AEW, and of course with her injury she's not able to compete right now, but when she comes back, oh, it's going to be so good. The AEW talent doesn't even know what's going to hit them. I'm so excited to see her come back healthy to that AEW ring because as women's champion she was very dominant, and she's going to be out there to prove a point. And if you've spoken to her, you know how passionate she is about the business. And wow, it's gonna be a lot of fun to see her return.
yeah, and she's a super nice person. It was so funny. Her booth was right next to mine. I'm very fortunate, as when I go to some of these shows, I get really good real estate. Right, you
Yeah,
can't ask for a better spot than having a table next to Thunder Rosa. I had a table the other night next to Luigi Primo. Uh, I mean, I'm telling you, dude, that's great real estate. And she said to me at the end of the night, I said, "Hey," she goes, "Hey, how did you do?" And I said, "Well, I sold 4 books." And she goes, "4 is better than 0."
that's true. That is true.
So yeah,
It
it's really how you look at it, and the perspective of things, and because people get discouraged real easy, it's like, "Oh man, I work so hard and da da da," but all this takes time.
Yeah. Well, and I would venture to guess that a lot of this is like feeding your soul. We love if you're this invested right now by writing these books and interviewing these talents. I would venture to guess that you probably love pro wrestling,
Oh,
and so that means that you're probably pretty passionate about it, and to be able to do something, to put pen to paper or to type on a keyboard, and while you're conversing with these stars of professional wrestling, and you're knowing again that you're putting that spotlight on each talent that you speak to. I mean, that's got to do something for your I don't want to say ego, but like for your soul. Like, hey man, I love pro wrestling and I've got 3 books that I've written, you know, that document the history of pro wrestling, document some of the great talents today of yesteryear, and of course with the previous Lance Von Erich book. I mean, you told that guy's whole like story. I mean, it's pretty incredible, and again, feeding that yeah, I don't want to say ego, but feeding your soul. I mean, there's got to be some reward to that too.
well, it's gratifying,
Yeah,
because look, I've known a lot of people who've told me, and I've done it too. Hey, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. I mean, I've been saying that all my life, right? And I didn't get it done until I was almost 50.
yeah,
The thing is, once you know what goes into a book, I can understand why people don't finish books. I mean, it is a very daunting task. The book I'm working on right now. I get in there and I have all these notes and I'm sifting through them and I'm thinking, there's just something missing here. You know, and maybe there's nothing missing here, but maybe I'm not telling it right. So, I have to step back and come back, and it's a little challenging than the Lance book was. The shorter stories are a little easy because they're short stories, right? And
right.
I know they're going to end fairly soon, but for a large book like that where you're carrying it on and you've got to get these these chapters to tie into each other. I'm just not there right now with the Bart book. I've written some chapters, but the thing with the Lance Von Erich book, for I don't know how many months it was, but I was like at this sticking point where I kind of didn't know how I was going to tell the story. I had all this information. I even had some chapters written, but one day it just came out of the blue, and I was like, you know what? That's exactly how I'm going to tell this one. And it just kind of fell out. It fell into place, and and I know that's going to happen with the next book. It's just I'm just not there yet.
Yeah. And I could see that too as a fellow writer, and no books yet, but every time I talk to you, Vinny, every time you send me a new podcast that you just did, it's like, man, you inspire me to do the same thing. And who knows, maybe a year from now, you and I will talk on your podcast and I'll be promoting my book. But I'm so blown away with what you're able to do with, like you said, the short stories. You're taking the interviews, you put a story with the interview, and it encapsulate this moment in time, whether it be, I think you spoke to Kerry Morton in 2021, right?
Yes.
And Kerry Morton now, he's the NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion. And, I don't think anyone had that on the calendar last year this time, that, oh yeah, Kerry Morton's going to be an NWA champion, and you'll have that pedigree in your book. I think that's really cool. I don't even know if people thought Kerry Morton was going to be still wrestling at this point. I mean, that was early on in his career. He hasn't really been wrestling for very long, so you got him relatively early in his career.
Yeah, and Blake Christian was one also too that I got early on in his career, and the Nikita Knight story too was really unbelievable how it fell on my lap. She was just wrestling like a month or two.
Wow.
And she did an interview with me, and then just a few months later she was signed to NXT. And now she's Thea Hill, and what a nice young lady, man. And I sent her a message, and I sent her a picture of the book and the cover, and she sent me a really nice message. Hey, I'm so happy for you. I'm so proud, of what you're doing, and thank you for what you're doing. Just a really nice message of congratulations.
That's really cool. So the one question that's on my mind, and I've been afraid to ask, but I want to definitely ask it, because I know that I've had interviews that haven't always gone well. Have you had an interview where you had very high expectations and it just didn't materialize the way you had hoped? You don't have to name names unless you want to.
I've had very few that it didn't go well. I mean, very, very few. I've had some that, that I didn't think I did that well after, after I got off the phone, I was like, man, that wasn't a very good interview at all. And then when I come back to put some commercials on it, and, I think, hey, it's not that bad,
Yeah.
But I had one where the guy was like challenging and very snarky, and just hard to kind of converse with. And then when it got down to the end, he was saying he thought it went pretty good, and I was like, man, I was ready for this thing to end a long time ago. But
I think the worst ones are when you get the one or two answers with no follow-up, like one or two word answers and no follow-up. So you're like, when did you start wrestling? Oh, I started in July 2020. Oh, okay. So where did you train for wrestling? I trained at Santino Brothers. Okay. I mean, I'm not saying
right.
anyone specifically, but I've had the interviews where, like, what was your favorite match? Oh, I wrestled this guy. So what was so good about that match? Oh, we tore down the house. Okay, but tell me more. And it's like you're pulling teeth trying to get something out of the guy.
Well, I think the whole trick for me is just really having a conversation. So I don't go in. I don't like I told you. I really don't like going in with questions. I don't like. I mean, I know enough about say, oh, okay, this person wrestled in the NWA for this long. Oh, this person trained with let's just say Harley Brace.
Yeah.
And golly, man, with that right there, I can get a pretty good conversation going and then unfold it. But you know what? I probably wouldn't have done the podcast, and I was going to mention this earlier, but after I was doing all the writing, I was putting out the books, and people were like, "Dude, you got to do a podcast." And I did a few in the beginning, and I really struggled with it. And they were like, "Yeah, you got to do a podcast." Well, I've done a couple. No, you got to keep it up. What the deal was, I can put a commercial in there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was like, it's just another opportunity to, tell people about my product, and I hope that people enjoy the interviews as well. I've got a couple really good ones. I don't know if you noticed, but I started interviewing people internationally, and I fell into a group of people in Scotland, and I've been wrestling or interviewing a lot of wrestlers from Scotland, and I say a lot, probably about 5 or 6 right now. It's kind of interesting, and they tell me about the scene, and they're very nice, and they're funny, and they're humorous, and they just they got good stories. So I've
Would
been
that be
doing
the
that.
Scottish Wrestling Alliance?
Say it one more time.
Is that the Scottish Wrestling Alliance?
ICW is where a
Okay.
lot of them, Insane Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, we have and I say we, I mean the Alliance. We have a friend, Fiona, who lives in Scotland, and so she does a lot of the emceeing for some of these shows. So it's I knew of Scotland Wrestling Alliance because again they used to be associated with the NWA, and at one point they had, long before the WWE, they had their own version of NXT, which was the same premise. Really, it was like, this is a show for our students to develop, and the WWE actually paid them for the name. I thought that was pretty cool. Sorry, that's a little off tangent, but just right. You said Scottish wrestling, then my brain started going to what I know about Scotland. I was actually supposed to go there before the pandemic. We had booked our vacation for late summer, early fall. We were going to go to Scotland, and I was hoping to catch some pro wrestling while I was there, but then COVID-19 hit and it shut everything down. We lived through that pandemic. How did that change your ability to connect with your audience, and how did it change your ability to connect with the talent that you speak to?
Well, I got a lot more writing done.
That's yes. I believe it.
I finished the Lance book, and then I got this idea that, hey, I can actually do it.
Yeah.
I can actually finish a book, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Like, I can do another one. And I think that's what I needed. I actually needed to be able to finish one, right?
Yeah, for sure. I like and again, I put myself as an aspiring writer too. Like I'll call myself a writer, but I don't have anything published like yourself. But when I see like, oh man, if you could just get that one out there, if you could just get that pen to paper and finish that book and sell it and release it and know that you've accomplished that, then how hard is it to do it again? You know what I mean? You've done it.
It's easier than you think.
Yeah, you say that, but I'm still sitting here trying to struggle and to get one. But I know I told you I'd keep you for about 45 minutes. We're approaching an hour here, but let's real quick. I want to plug the website, wrestleville.com. You've been around since 2017. The podcast, I was looking on Spotify. You have episodes that go all the way back to 2020 on Spotify. What about some of your older stories? Are those available for folks to read or watch?
Well, the The interviews that you'll see on the website and on Spotify are, and I believe I'm about to be on Heart Radio as well.
Nice.
I'm slowly expanding my podcast. It's like when you're doing all this stuff, it's like some people say, "Oh, you got to do this and you got to do that." I'm trying, I'm trying, yeah, but I all my interviews for the podcast, they're available. And then the stories that were prior to the podcast are in the book.
Beautiful. And I have it in the merch, or excuse me, I have it in the description, a link to the Wrestleville store. And if you guys, I mean, like, look, you can get the original Lance by Chance. That was the first book. Also, Wrestleville, it's still out, $19.95. But that's the first volume. The second volume, same price, $19.95. And if you really enjoy the podcast, the Wrestleville podcast, you're enjoying these books, you want to help support Vinny, you can also pick up a shirt. They have a really handsome black on gray shirt that it's the Wrestleville logo. It's pretty awesome. And in fact, I'm going to probably pick one up soon too. What else? How else can folks follow you on the socials, and where else can they get some Vinny Berry time?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Wrestleville Podcast. There's a Wrestleville Facebook page. There's a Wrestleville Lance Von Erich Facebook group. And so you can find me out there. You can go to my website. You can send me an email. You mentioned the t-shirt. I have one that should be coming in the mail tomorrow. I've ordered a few weeks ago, and there's a friend of mine who put in an order as well, and he got his shirts yesterday and today, and so mine should be coming this week, and that'll be on there. But if you like wrestling stories, if you like learning about these people who entertain us, the stories are there, and I'll just say keep your eye on the podcast. There's going to be some stuff coming up here pretty soon that I think people are really maybe some hardcore old school wrestling fans are really going to enjoy. But I think people who just love wrestling in general are going to enjoy the fact that, wow, I get to hear that story, and I get to learn about some people that I just never even knew of, and that's why I do it, and that's why I enjoy doing this so much, is because I'm learning is along the way too.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of jump on top of that point. I've been very fortunate over the last. I've been doing a lot of I've been podcasting for 15 years, Vinny, and for a while there, we had a stretch where we were doing interviews almost as often as you are now. But for us back then, we were doing 2 a month, which was a lot for us. And you really get to know the people behind the wrestler. You see, Kevin Douglas, and at the time he was the NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion. Somebody I absolutely thought was just a maniac in the ring. So much fun to watch. But then you get to meet the person and you get to know the person. And in this situation, I became friends. And he's been, he for a while was also a part of our podcasting network too. So I get what you're talking about. Like it's not just the stories, you get to actually meet the person. And, the old adage where they're, this is my gimmick and it's just me with the volume turned up to 11. I mean, there's truth to that, but there's also a real person behind whatever gimmick that wrestler's using.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes you'll talk to these people and you'll kind of expect something different from them,
Oh yeah.
And it's like, wow, it's I kind of expected something different,
Well, Papo Esco, and I know you spoke to him, and he's a guy that I very much admire and respect as well. I'm expecting an entirely different guy. I did not know that he had such an exuberance of knowledge about pro wrestling, especially with the NWA. I'm like, geez, Papo, you'd be a perfect writer for my website talking about the NWA. That's the kind of stuff that I really enjoy seeing and hearing about and learning. And I'm assuming you do too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, I do want to thank you for your time, Vinny. Is there anything else you'd like to plug while you're here?
Well, I would just say this. I'm really proud of the Pro Wrestling Vault Volume 2. I'm proud of all the books, but it's funny how the last one just kind of seems like, you know, it's a brand new little baby and it's
Yeah.
just so cute, and just I'm just so proud of it right now, right? And I'm getting a lot of nice feedback. I'm getting a lot of feedback from on Amazon. A lot of wrestlers that are featured in the book, are just telling me what they think about it, and it just makes me feel good because you know I want people to appreciate it, and it's
Yeah,
something that I like, and like you said, it is art, and you look at it and you go through the stories and I just flipped to the page with Leilani Kai. Um, I don't know if you've ever had the chance to talk to
no,
her,
I
but
haven't.
she is a sweet, sweet person. I mean,
Yeah,
just so good, dude. Me and her have chatted for I was looking for some specific pictures and I said, "Hey, I hope you're not busy." She says, "No, I'm laid out here on my bed and I'm going through a box of pictures and I'm going to send you something." And it was just I just thought, "Wow, how cool." It just
yeah,
how relaxed it is, like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll stop doing whatever I was doing. Who knows what she was doing, right? But
sure.
she took the time to help me. And you know what? She sent me, also, too, I want to say that we haven't plugged this yet. In each book,
Oh
you will
yeah.
get a signed autograph. And Leilani Kai signed uh, some stickers. And what do you got in the first one there?
So in the first one, I
Yeah.
had it's oddly enough Tim Storm,
Okay.
somebody who has been on this show, and somebody who I admire quite a bit. And I know it's an authorized signature because he's also signed my 10 pounds of replica.
Right.
So it is a legit signature. But Tim's a great dude. And again, he's a former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. So many guys that this could have been that could have signed this. And luckily, I got Tim Storm on that first one. This one, the new one, oddly enough, is the current NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion
Okay.
in Kerry Morton.
All right.
So you you scored, or I scored twice, thank you. And
And yeah, and
it's
I will
awesome.
tell the fans, they're stickers. They're signed stickers. I sent them to them. All these people live in different cities. We did it for Lance, he lived in a different country, and they signed the stickers and send them back. Leilani Kai signed. Duke the Dumpster signed, Kerry Morton signed, Jeremiah Plunkett, Sal Renaro, Mario Mancini, a few others. But I think really, really good autographs in this one. But what I like about Leilani Kai, and I just found this out, she sent them back to me, I don't know, a couple months back. And the other night I was going through it and I thought, what is in here? So I dumped out the envelope of the signed labels, and she put in there a baseball card of her, and she signed it for me.
That's really cool.
And I thought that was really nice. I just thought, wow, that was cool. And I showed my wife. I was really, taken back by that, because I remember when she was in the first WrestleMania,
Yeah.
and I always thought that, and I always felt like this. I was young then, but I think like this now. Like, a lot of wrestling companies don't use that person. They're just not using that person to their potential.
You sure?
He was one of the first ones I felt like she wasn't being used to her potential. And that
That's
was when I
really
was
cool.
14.
That's really cool, man. That's great. That makes me happy for you, because that's something that you won't ever, won't ever disappear. Let me share my one story, and then we'll call it a night. But
Okay.
Adam Pearce, Scrap Iron Adam Pearce. He's currently working for the WWE. We see him each and every week talking to, putting down Ronda Rousey and then getting choked out for his efforts. But for a long time, he was the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. Before that, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla Heavyweight Champion out here in Southern California. Worked a lot of the indie shows out here. He had been on the podcast 2 or 3 times, and I never actually met him in person. Now I've watched him wrestle hundreds of times, but I never said anything to him other than, "Hey, what's up, champ?" as he walked by. And my wife, who then was my girlfriend, who hates pro wrestling but loves talking to people, went and saw him, introduced herself as Jay Cal's girlfriend, and he said, "Jay Cal's here? Bring him over." And we ended up going out to dinner that night with Adam Pearce after he defended the 10 pounds of gold against X-Pac, Sean Waltman, at Applebee's in Yuma, Arizona. And ever since then, like we exchanged Christmas cards. My wife talks to him all the time. I mean, it's really cool, that dynamic, these relationships that you form with these people who, otherwise would never have been accessible to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think that's really cool, man. I think that's awesome. So we'll wrap it up here, Vinny. Again, I appreciate you so much for your time. You continue to be an inspiration to me. I'm going to double down on this again and say, guys, Wrestleville. I mean, get the book, get it. It's $20. You know what that is? That's McDonald's when you upsize your meal. It's nothing. And honestly, the entertainment you'll get from that book, you dive right in there. The stories are easy to read. No disrespect. It's not Chaucer. You're not trying to read Old English. This is written for fans to read. And I think you really will enjoy these stories. And of course, Vinny's a guy who's out here doing the grind, the same thing that we're doing over here at the Alliance blog. So we want to support him and lift him up. Hopefully, if you guys, I know Jeremy said he subscribed to your subscribed via Google Podcast. If you guys are on Spotify, subscribe. Any other podcasting format, get out there, subscribe to WrestleView.
Wrestleville.
We want to push. Oh, I said view, huh? I'm sorry. Wrestleville. Sorry. Apologize, guys. But make sure you go and subscribe to that, because again, it helps him. It gets, the more subscribers he gets, the more reach he gets, the more opportunities he has to interview the bigger and better celebrities in the world of professional wrestling. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinny. All right, guys, have a great weekend. We'll see you on Thursday for the Alliance Guys podcast. And until next time, Vinny and myself, we're out of here. You guys have a good night, and we'll see you at the matches. Thanks for joining the stream. This has been a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com. We genuinely appreciate your support. Would you consider subscribing so you'll never miss a future episode? I'd also like to remind you we do a live stream every Tuesday at 5 p.m. for NWA Power. You can find us on social media at The Alliance Blog. And until next time, we are The Alliance.